Welcome to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. I'm Matthew of castingacross.com, where I explore the quarry and culture of fly fishing. This is episode 386 of the podcast. This is a Cast1 episode, which means that this is aimed a little bit more for new anglers, for people who are maybe interested in fly fishing or just getting started in fly fishing. But as I have done in previous Cast1 episodes, I want to make it clear. I may be covering something that's new to you if you've been fishing for a long time, or something that addresses a topic within fly fishing that you are well aware of, that you are already acquainted with, but from a different perspective. And beyond that, I intend for these to not only be helpful to new anglers as they explore fly fishing, but also experienced anglers as they introduce others to fly fishing. So if my vocabulary, if my perspective, if my point of view can be helpful to you as you help your neighbor, your grandchild, your child, whoever, as they become an angler, then that's also part of the reason why I put these special Cast1 episodes out every now and again. And if this has been sent to you, if you're listening to the first time, then you can just put Cast1 in the search bar over at castingacross.com, or even just scroll down through the podcast archive on your favorite podcast catcher, and you'll see probably 15 or 16 podcasts that are really more designed for the new angler and with the new angler in mind. So today's topic is opening day. Now, there's a little bit more to it than that. We're going to talk about a number of aspects that I think are pertinent for opening day. This is being recorded very early in April 2nd. It's being actually released on April 2nd. But this is right around the time where in most places there are opening days for trout fishing. Now, this is something that I had a hate-love relationship with for a long time. I lived in a small town in Pennsylvania that had a very popular trout river that ran through it, as well as a pond that received an absolutely ridiculous quantity of trout that were stocked by the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission. And it was absolute madness for that opening weekend. We were talking not only traffic jams, but nowhere to park, long stop signs that usually you really kind of could roll through, and people who brought their bass boats onto our tiny little pond that throughout the rest of the year you maybe would see a kayak or canoe in, but for this weekend there would be big old boats and people with multiple rods strung around them. It was kind of interesting because there was a couple 100 yards that were designated as youth fishing, and that was like the only clear spot around the entire lake would be those spots. Every other kind of linear foot had someone or someone's bait bucket or someone's rod holder leaned up on it. And so I was pretty agitated about opening day, and you say, but wait, you're an angler. Weren't you excited that you got to go fishing? Well, I not only had a bad attitude about those people, I had a wrong perspective about fishing waters. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, if you have been fly fishing for any length of time, or if you've been around fishing for any length of time, if you have started fishing, hopefully you have looked into your state's regulations and how they regulate water. And so for a lot of different states, they have different regulations for trout fishing. There's some waters that are catch and release, some waters that are fly fishing only, some waters that are delayed harvest, where at some point in time in the season you can keep fish, other times it is catch and release. And then there's water that's just open. And these different waters, based upon your state, are going to have different titles, different names, and different kind of reasons why they are put in place. Actually, about 2 months ago, I recorded a podcast. I think it was back in either November or December of 2025 on different types of regulated waters and some of the reasons why different state agencies utilize these techniques for the populations of fish as well as the populations of anglers. But all that to say, a lot of the places that I fished when I was living in Pennsylvania were fly fishing only, catch and release. And as a guy in my 20s, I thought this is the best place to fish because this has been set aside for me. The rabble, the peasants can't come and fish this water. I can fish it, and most of that water was open year round. Well, as I matured, as I fished more water, as I thought there may be greener pastures on the other side of the fence, I came to realize how wrong I was. Now, some of that fly fishing only catch and release water is spectacular, but some of that other water that wasn't under special regulations, that was under general trout regulations. So that is to say, you couldn't fish it whether you're using a fly rod, whether you're using a spinning rod, whether you're throwing, power bait or worms. You couldn't fish it until opening day. So it was too late in my angling life, but I like to think that we all have a little bit of grace, where I discovered that opening day is still special. And this is something that's become more apparent to me as I've been up here in New England. The way things are managed are a little different. Maine, New Hampshire, uh, Vermont, and Massachusetts in particular. And opening day still means something. And I think that's the second thing. I know I really haven't talked about technique. I really haven't talked about the way you approach it. But I think these are just a couple of important things to point out. First and foremost, if you are a new angler, any water where there's fish is worth fishing. That's just something to remember. And there is something good about that fly fishing only catch and release water that may be open year round, but there's also something good about the other water that may be just upstream or downstream of that section, that maybe those feeder creeks that pour into that, or maybe be even the river that special regulated water flows into, if it's a larger river. That is water that's worth fishing and worth waiting for that opening day so you can legally go at it. But opening day, again, I think there's something special about it. If you read older angling literature, you know how special opening day was. There was this anticipation. There was this buildup. There were rituals. There were rites of passage. There were multi-generational activities that were around it. It's just a really cool thing. It's something that I've come to appreciate more as I have gotten more into hunting in these last few years after not doing it for quite a while. There's this real excitement about opening day. The anticipation is quite something. I mean, to be fair, I have that in a lot of fishing up here in New England because everything's frozen, and so it's more about waiting for ice out and for the water to come down, which we'll talk about here in a minute, than it is about the calendar turning. However, it's the same thing, and I think there's something special about it, and I'm happy I can fish year-round in most places if I want to go and drive and find open water that's under those year-round regulations. But it's also kind of nice to have an area or a spot where opening day still means something. So if you're new to fly fishing, don't despise the water that doesn't have those special regulations on it, and wait for opening day, and maybe even add something to it, a special breakfast, camping out, whatever it may be. So, with that said, what are some things to think about as opening day approaches? So, if you've just gotten into fly fishing, maybe you fly fished the previous few years or even just last year, or you got your equipment for Christmas. I mean, this is not uncommon. Someone says, "Hey, I'd like to try fly fishing," and they don't know if they want to invest the money, but somebody who knows them, loves them, is privy to their wish list, buys them rod, reel, flies, line, leader, all those things for Christmas. Step one, and it may be too late if your water's already open, but make sure you know how to use your gear. If you cast left-handed, you're going to have to flip that reel around, and there's instructions on YouTube about how to do that. You have to make sure that you know knots. The time to figure out that line that comes to the very end of where your fly attaches, which we call tippet, is really, really thin, and it is not going to tolerate any old knot. And there's actually the eyes of the flies, the eyes of the hooks are so small that not any old line is going to fit into them. And so you need to become at least relatively proficient in your ability to tie those knots. So becoming acquainted with your gear before opening day matters if you're new to angling. But for everybody who is a fly fisher, opening day, whether that be January 1st or whether it be April 15th or something in between there, is a good date to remind yourself, I got to get my gear in order before then. One of the worst things you can do is go out on the water on opening day, being so excited, or just your first day out for the season, and you go to put your foot in your waders, and your foot busts out the bottom because that seam connecting your waders to the booty at the bottom has dry rotted out. Or you go to tie your shoelaces on your wading boots, and those laces snap, and now you got one loose boot that day. You could, you've got a kink in your fly line. You didn't buy new leaders, and your leader is nasty and gnarled up from last season. There's so many things that are worth paying attention to before you go out fly fishing for the first time. Now, I would say the best thing to do is never put your gear away in a bad way. But even if your gear has been put away in a pristine manner, it's subject to all the sorts of moth and rust which destroy the things of this world. And so it's a good idea to take a look at stuff. But that also is kind of a ritual that you, through the wintertime, or even just in those weeks leading up to opening day or the beginning of your fly fishing season, you get your stuff out, you take a look at it. I would even say that if you have only started fly fishing, know what flies you have. Make sure you have flies that are going to work. So if you're new to fly fishing, again, you maybe got an assortment of flies for a holiday, or you just started buying stuff that that looked good, or maybe that you heard would work, but it was from last season at the end of the season. Well, what the fish are going to be eating in April is very different. Well, let me rewind that a little bit. What fish are going to be eating in April is going to be somewhat different than what they're going to be eating in October. There are some things that a woolly bugger is going to work, a hare's ear nymph's going to work, a prince nymph is going to work, a midge is going to work. But as far as the dry flies go and some of the more specific nymph patterns, there's going to be some patterns that are going to be much more effective in the springtime than they are in the fall. Like I said, we'll talk a little bit about that here in a few minutes. Actually, what I will say is one of the initial Cast1 podcasts was called The Seasons of Trout Fishing, and it kind of goes into the differences between spring, summer, fall, and winter. I know my seasons. Anyway, you're just looking at your gear, making sure it's in order. And if you've been fly fishing for a couple of seasons, it's always a good idea to go through, make sure you have the flies that you think you have, make sure that they're in good shape. If they're larger hooks, like for streamers, then sharpening those hooks. The lighter hooks are worth looking at and sharpening too. It's just that a lot of times they'll bend or even break before before they need to be significantly sharpened. Whereas streamers, those flies that imitate bait fish and things like that, because they're a heavier gauge wire for the hook, then they're going to dull, and you can go ahead and give those a sharpening. And again, there's information on how to do that all over the good little internet that we have. So that's the first thing I would say when it comes to your approach to opening day or your opening day, the first part of the season. Make sure your gear is in order. Make sure you have what you need, and what you need, go out and get it, procure it. Something else I think is important is make sure you have got that fishing license, and make sure that you have all appropriate stamps and stuff like that. If you are brand new to angling, you got to get a fishing license. My boys love watching Northwoods Law and some of those other outdoor law enforcement shows. And it's amazing how often people are caught, in either in reality or through feigning ignorance. They didn't realize that you need a fishing license. Well, you do. And in a lot of places, you need other stamps to go on top of that, whether it's where you're fishing, a certain locality, or what you're fishing for. A lot of times, trout will require a special license. So make sure you have brushed up on not only what goes in your wallet, but what goes into your head, so that your feet and your rod and your fly are in the right place. Just worth paying attention to. I look at the beginning of every season to make sure nothing has changed. I would hate to get in trouble because I assumed that April 1st was the day I could fish these trout ponds in New Hampshire, for example, when it got moved back to April 8th, or maybe I missed it and the time to be there was March 25th or something like that. Just paying attention to those things are really quite important. All right, so step one is appreciate opening day for what it is. Step two, don't overlook those waters that open up on opening day, even if you are fly fishing and there have been other opportunities for you. Step three is check out that gear. Make sure everything is where it should be and that you're familiar with it, especially if you are a new angler. Kind of circling back to that, any fly shop worth its salt, and I mean this, if they look down upon you, then leave them a nasty review. But go in with your gear. I don't care if it didn't come from that shop. Go in and say, hey, is this set up right? Does this look good? And then buy a handful of flies. Say, what kind of tippet do I need? Buy a hat. Spend some money. But anyone, assuming they're not 15 deep at the register, or they've got some program going on where they brought somebody in, they've got the place all torn up because they're doing something special. Any fly shop worth its salt should help a new angler in particular as they're trying to navigate their gear. Short of that, send me a picture. I'll gladly take a look at it and let you know what I think. But so then fourth is make sure that you have your licenses and make sure that you are following all appropriate state laws. Now, what do you do? Well, a few things are going to be happening. First and foremost, springtime is going to be a season like fall, and to a certain degree, certain climates in the summertime, but mostly those shoulder seasons, spring and fall, where the mornings and the afternoons are going to be very different. We've got cool, chilly mornings where there's not necessarily going to be a lot of insect activity, but once that sun hits that water, it starts to warm things up. You're going to start to see bugs moving around. So if you wake up bright and early, there may be some insect activity. There may be some hatches depending on the water temperature and the air temperature. And getting to know those things is not super easy. And although there are some hard and fast numbers, some empirical data that goes along with when bugs are going to move, it's not going to be that, okay, I put my stream thermometer in the water, it says this temperature, so I'm going to start casting this fly, and the fish better bite it because that's what the book says is going to happen. You have to pay attention. But that said, you need to dress accordingly, and you also need to be ready for the fish to not be super active first thing in the morning. So that may mean slower retrieves if you are fishing streamers. That may mean fishing nymphs first thing in the morning. You might not get those beautiful upright wing dead drift fly takes that we want to have first thing in the morning in April if you live north of the Mason-Dixon line. It just isn't necessarily going to be what's happening. However, as the sun starts to warm things up, you are going to start seeing those olives. You are going to start seeing those other types of mayflies come off. There's probably going to be some stonefly activity. They're active all winter long, and so they're going to be around there in the springtime. But of course, what's happening in Maine is different than what's happening in Pennsylvania. Is different than what's happening in Michigan. Different than what's happening in Washington State, of course. But be prepared for those temperatures to swing, which is going to impact, 1, your comfort, so dress accordingly, 2, insect activity, and 3, trout being cold-blooded critters and their metabolism shifting. They're going to be how active they are morning time versus the afternoon. It's awesome to get out first thing in the morning, but at the same time, if you get intel that things don't heat up until 10 or 11 when that sun is over the ridge or over the trees, then there's no reason to bust your butt and get out there first thing in the morning. Just something to be aware of. And again, there's exceptions to every rule, and the bite might be on, even if things are just above freezing, which they're not going to be just above freezing, but it's just something to pay attention to. The next thing is you may encounter high water. So where we are, we're in the 60s right now, here in April. However, we had a lot of snow this season. Some of my friends still have remnant glaciers in their yards from the way that they plowed or the way that they moved snow around. Even though we've had a string of days in the 60s and even up into the 70s. What that means is a lot of our water is running high because after that snow, we got lots of rain. So there are a lot of places where, because of springtime weather, April showers bring May flowers. That's how it goes. Yeah. Because of either snow melt or impoundments, reservoirs being full, and them letting water over the dam or through the dam. Just the spring weather or the snow melt. Then you're going to have high water. So that means a few different things. One, you are going to need to be careful when and how you wade. Something that is really important. This is just as valid as fishing intel and information as what fly to use. Learn to read stream gauges. Whether you are going to the USGS's website, whether you're talking to the fly shop, whether you're using an app like Trout Routes or something like that, get to know what your local water fishes safely at and fishes efficiently at. What do I mean by that? There's certain cubic feet per second where the gauge measures where it is just not safe to wade. Sure, you can go ankle deep and maybe you can cast from the shore, but it's just not safe to wade with abandon like you might under normal conditions. It's good to know what those numbers are before you get out there, even if you're new, because you might be wading into a situation that's dangerous. But then also, the fishing is not going to necessarily be super easy if the water is flowing fast. Now, the fish are going to be okay. Fish can survive and take cover and find refuge in the current in all sorts of places when that water is flowing fast and looks like chocolate milk. However, are they going to be eating, and can you get your fly down to where they are? And the answer to that is probably only selectively and no. It is very hard to fish when the water is super fast. It's one of those things that requires techniques and equipment that utilizes a little bit of experience and specialty. So just be aware that if that water is flowing high and fast, to the point where it is atypical, fishing just might not be for that day. That said, if the water is flowing just a little bit high, a little bit fast, a little bit off color, there are some things that you can do. Utilizing weight, using non-lead pinch on shot is a great way to get that fly down low. You pair that with a strike indicator, aka a bobber, and you have a very efficient and easy way to fish. And one of the nice things about fishing high, fast water with a strike indicator and with a bobber, a strike indicator and some split shot, some weight, is that those fish are going to get hooked a little bit easier than if that flow is going at a bit more moderate pace. And you don't have that extra weight on there. You think about that. That strike indicator is moving, that weight is moving, and that fly is moving. And if that fish takes it, you have the extra benefit of that, all those other points of tension on your line pulling back against the corner of the mouth of that fish. So it's a great way to get a little bit of confidence and ID where those fish are in that water column. Faster water is also nice for fishing streamers. And this is another great confidence approach for new anglers. You cast out and you retrieve, especially if you are used to fishing a streamer. This is not that different than retrieving a worm or even a spinner. Cast it out there, and then, again, pinching the rod with your casting forefinger and thumb while holding your rod in line in one hand, and just pinching that line with forefinger and thumb with enough tension where with your other hand you can pull it through in short little strips while maintaining tension. There's going to be a little belly between the line that comes out of your rod tip and where it hits the water. You just pull it in, and when you feel a thud or a stop, then you just give it a nice quick jerk with that line hand, and if it connects to something, then you pull that rod tip up. That's called a strip set, which is important for not pulling that fly right out of that fish's mouth. Lots more information about that online. But when you have that faster, higher water, that's a great way to prospect for fish. Try to find where they are hanging out. And you don't want to go into the fastest water. You try to find those seams. What's a seam? It's where you have fast water up against slower water. The water's high and fast. It's where you have really fast water up against quicker water. It may even be that spot between the fast current and a little bit of an eddy that is created because of a boulder, a bridge pylon, or even a bend in the river. Those are great places to target fish with those nymph rigs that I mentioned earlier with the strike indicator or with that streamer. Fishing through there, allowing that current to move that fly, because once again, that current moving that fly is imitating what that current is doing to foodstuffs. And another benefit of higher and faster water, which we often see in springtime, and it's being off color, the fish are going to have to make a split-second choice because that thing's coming by quickly, and they're not getting the same sort of visual clarity that they would get in a very, very clear stream. So you have those things working in your favor. Doesn't mean that pattern and presentation don't matter. It just means that you have a little bit of flexibility in how you do and what you do it with. All right, so those are just some quick thoughts. Now, is there much more we could talk about? Absolutely. Should we talk about the difference between the leader and the tippet that you use if you're fishing a streamer versus the leader and the tippet that you use if the water is going at a much more reasonable pace and there are bugs coming off? Yes. But all that information is not only just readily available online, you can find it all over the place at castingacross.com. Got 10 years of articles, got 10 years of links, and quite a few years of podcasts that are there. So these are just a few thoughts for you if you're a new angler and you are looking at opening day, whether that came a couple of weeks ago for you or it's still a couple of weeks in the future. These are just some things to contemplate. It is a wonderful time of the year. It's an exciting time of the year. You get to get back out there. And I guess the last thing I would say is just keep at it. The fishing just gets better. Most places don't, opening day is not the best day of fishing. It's usually a few weeks or even a month away, but it's a great way to get out there. And especially if you're a new angler, you're going somewhere where maybe they've thrown a bunch of dumb fish in, you can just get your feet wet and get your hands dirty and get back on the saddle when it comes to catching some fish. As always, if you have any questions, you have any comments, you have any accusations, things that you think are essential for a new angler to know, let me know. Matthew at castingacross.com. This week on the podcast, you can tell where my mind has been. Fly fishing wader repair 101. So actually, all of my fly fishing waders have held up great. I have a pair of Sims waders. I know they're taking a lot of heat lately, but these are, 22 years old. And my son will be wearing them this year. They're just breathable, lightweight waders, and they're in great shape. Zero patches on them at all. A pair of Orvis waders that are probably 10 years old. And the only patch that I put on those is because I put a 2-aught Clouser dead center in my, like right over my navel. I was just hauling my heart out in some heavy wind on the coast, and that thing came back at me. I'm glad it hit me in the stomach and not in the face. But that was an easy patch job. And then I have another pair of Reddington waders that's in really good shape. And then I have a couple others that are just, kicking around. Why does someone need that many pair of waders, you ask? That's a great question. But I have a pair of Frog Togs hunting waders that I was seeing the praises of for my first 2 seasons. Well, this last season, leak, wear at the seams, which means they were not made well. And, you read the reviews and think, oh, I'm not going to have that problem. And so I've already had a couple of issues with these, but I think they're salvageable. And so I've done some patch jobs, and so I've thrown some pictures of me doing said patch jobs over on that article, which is called Fly Fishing Wader Repair 101. Talk about some options of how you can find your leaks and fix your leaks. Wednesday's article is called Video, the Old College Fly Fishing Try, in which I share a book called Tight Lines, 10 Years of the Yale Angler's Journal. The Yale Angler's Journal is a now defunct publication from Yale University that features, at least this collection, features some pretty noteworthy names outside of their student and alumni body. So definitely worth checking out that book. You can find it cheap, used, and it's just a good one to have. It is a high caliber of angling anthology, which can't be said about every collection of fly fishing stories out there. This week's recommendation is a book. I will certainly get to reviewing this on the YouTube channel in the near future, but I'm looking at a Post-it note right now. I've got like a couple of weeks already planned out. So because I just finished it last week, I wanted to throw out that I enjoyed Real Salty by Ryan Johnston. I have read 2 of his books. Really is about guide stories, and Real Salty is about his adventures as a guide, but being guided in saltwater adventures. And the way I'll describe this in much greater detail when I review the book on YouTube, it's like what I like about when I'm guided or when I'm hanging out with fly fishing guides. It's stories. It's their stories about their fishing and their watching other people fish. Certainly not the most sophisticated writing or anything like that, but that's not what I'm looking for. This is a fun read that if you just want a quick read, if you want something that is just written by somebody who absolutely adores being on the water in any way, shape, or form, then you should pick up Real Salty by Ryan Johnston. I will put a link to where you can find that book in this podcasts. It's a new series, Cast1 and Podcasts. Excuse me. I will put the show notes of this podcast over at castingacross.com, where you can pick up Real Salty by Ryan Johnston. Thanks for listening to the Casting Across Fly Fishing podcast. Please subscribe to your favorite podcast app and rate the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Then head over to castingacross.com, where there's 3 posts a week on the people, places, and things that go into the pursuit of fish.